A text says, "You're on my mind." A bouquet from 1-800-Flowers says, "You're my everything." Heartfelt moments belong in the real world, not just your phone. For 50 years, 1-800-Flowers has helped millions of people make memories that'll last a lifetime with gifts they'll cherish forever. Their expertly curated arrangements and gift baskets ship nationwide with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Don't wait for the next big moment. Make it when you visit 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast.
This week, potatoes are the latest food that is proven to grow well under solar panels. Goodbye, steak and potatoes, and hello, solar and potatoes. Warning, do not eat solar panels without gravy.
Businesses are flocking to South Australia, which will have the world's first gigawatt-scale grid that is 100% renewables. Also flocking to South Australia, the bar-tailed godwit, a bird that migrates all the way from Alaska and is also a fan of clean energy.
The bar-tailed godwit, that's just fun to say.
Yeah.
It's a comedy word, godwit. We live in a fossil fuel world, and that world is in chaos due to the volatility of fossil fuels right now in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. Too bad there wasn't an alternative. Wait, there is. That's what we talk about on the show, so we'll mock those problems.
Home battery storage is now a thing in New York City. And hey, if home batteries can make it in New York City, they can make it anywhere.
All that and more in this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
All right, so you and I had a rare public appearance over the weekend. We were both in the same room and both outside of our own homes for a change.
Yeah.
Really fun little film screening at our local IMAX theater. I thought it was really fun. It was a few different films, our friend Lowell and mainly my film from 1994, but I had this stop motion animated character called the Blob Thing, so I showed a few of those. These are just 1-minute shorts. And that was wild. I never thought I would see the Blob Thing in IMAX. Like, it almost filled that entire IMAX screen, and it was wild.
It was a big blob on that screen, the Blob Thing, which was a stop-motion animated character. Yes, good screening. It's a good thing there wasn't more people there. The theater fit more people, but the reception area was pretty full and loud.
Yeah.
And raucous.
Raucous.
And I must say that I used to have a TV show, and people would come up to me all the time and say, "I love your show."
Yeah.
So people were coming up to me at this thing and saying, "I love your show." And I was thinking, what show do I have? What, do you remember the one from the 90s? Is that what's going on? Is it showing again somewhere? And then I thought, oh, it's the podcast.
Yeah.
People here in person with actual faces and living and breathing human beings came up to me and said they love the show, about 5 of them. And I'd like to shout out Mike Burns and his spouse, Elizabeth, who say they love listening to our show, and everyone else who did. I'm flattered that everyone is not only listening to the show, but having great things to say about it. So I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's something we don't do very often, get out in public. So that was a lot of fun. All right. And also I went to Fargo a couple of weeks ago, the Fargo Film Festival. This has become a somewhat
Where's
annual.
Fargo, Brian?
North Dakota. It's
so that's about how long of a drive from where we live?
It's about a 9-hour drive from where we live. So that's what we do. And we do it electric.
Yep.
And have done it a few times now. Anyway, I just wanted to mention a couple of these sort of, clean energy related films that I saw. And the first one was called Unless Something Goes Terribly Wrong. And this was a feature-length doc about wastewater treatment infrastructure, which sounds incredibly boring. I don't know.
Yep.
But and not technically to do with clean energy, but we talk a lot on the show about aging infrastructure. This is a real issue, especially with the electrical grid as we, need to expand electricity production and distribution. Well, guess what? Wastewater treatment plants all over North America are all falling apart because, it seems like they were all built 50, 60 years ago, and they all have kind of aging components and infrastructure. And so, the film is a sort of a wake-up call that we need to start doing something about this. But it was in a super fun way. Like, it was kind of like the TV show Parks and Rec, but it was real life. It was a real people and a real documentary.
Oh, okay. So what's it called again?
It's called Unless Something Goes Terribly Wrong.
Oh,
gosh. Which is what everyone is waiting for in the wastewater industry.
Really?
Yeah, it just seems like, every system is kind of on the precipice, and, all of these physical equipment that they use is all aging. And as soon as something goes wrong, it's always a bit of a panic to kind of try and find a replacement part and try and keep these things running.
Okay.
But Then the other one, planet walkers. So there's a guy named John Francis. He's a famous American environmentalist who I was not aware of, but he's known as the planet walker. And there was a big oil disaster in 1971 in the San Francisco Bay. This was a massive oil spill. 2 tankers collided. And
wow.
A vague memory
How did
of
I
this.
not know about that?
I know, yeah.
I'm a bit younger than you. I'm a couple years younger than you, but wow, I didn't know that. How did I not know that?
I know. I would have been...
I'm sure our listeners in California know that.
Yeah, I would have been 6 or 7 years old at the time. So I did have some vague recollection of it. But, this would have been likely the first major oil spill to get a lot of media attention because it was right in the San Francisco Bay Area. Like, this is ridiculous.
How did I not know that? I'm sorry. Apologies to listeners whose lives may have been affected by this, but I somehow was not on my radar. I was 4 or 5 at the time.
Yeah. So this guy, John Francis, was in that area at the time, and this, provoked him into becoming an environmental activist. And, he took up walking. He didn't drive in any cars, any fossil fueled vehicles for, 2 or 3 decades. And he would walk everywhere. He would literally walk around the whole country. He stopped speaking for a long time, too. That was part of his protest. But in the meantime, he sort of earned a PhD and eventually became part of the U.S. government that was writing the regulations for things around, oil safety and oil spills and whatnot. So he had he's still with us. He's had an incredible life doing lots of amazing activism in the clean energy space.
So my brother, who's 10 years older than me, was forced into retirement in the beginning of the pandemic, I think, roughly.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in several years because of the pandemic and because of he's a bit of a hermit. He took over my mother's house. Went to see him the other night, and he has no working sewage, no working drain.
That's not good.
It is not, Brian. And I won't get into details about how he is living, but he's also not have a car. He does have money because for some reason he invested in gold, and that's doing well for him.
Yeah.
Congratulations to him. And he does have retirement money coming in. He's quite happy with his financial situation, but he's also saying, well, if I take my money out of gold, I wouldn't have made all that money to pay for the sewer, which he thinks will be a lot more than it is. And he's walking everywhere.
Yeah.
So he's literally walking across this entire city, which would take, 2.5 hours for one trip.
Yeah. I mean, if you have the time, it's not the worst thing. I used to enjoy walking to work, for instance. I thought that was really enjoyable.
That was a bit shorter than 2.5 hours.
Way shorter.
It's healthy. I'll say that. It's a healthy lifestyle. But he kept saying, well, this is how they used to live 150 years ago. And they did.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to go back to that.
Well, I mean, perfect segue from the wastewater documentary. It's, you don't have a lot of spare time if something goes wrong with your plumbing.
Yes, and that's what I'm worried about. And anyway, I was talking to my son, who is an engineering student just about to graduate with his 4-year, whatever it is that engineers get. He's a civil engineer. And I know a lot of engineers listen to this show. And we got to talking, and it came up again, as it always does. He says, because he had a professor talking about the benefits of, autonomy, of autonomous robo-taxis and that. And I keep saying to him, your engineering prof should be on this because the design of cities may change.
Yes.
In your career, easily in your career, maybe a few years into your career, of how they should be designed. And for instance, parking lots may not be needed anymore. And I'm not saying everybody uses autonomous. The knock against it is that it'll expand the suburbs because you can easily commute from the suburbs and you don't want to have urban sprawl.
Possibly, yeah.
But yeah, he said, we live in Saskatchewan, Canada, and we're oil-centric here. There's a lot of oil talk on your social media and people are influenced. I'm very disappointed to hear that his colleagues in his classes are, even though a lot of them are from rural situations where their families come from, are very pro-fossil fuels and they've been listening to anti-EV stuff like lithium mining is terrible and it's really not good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, as engineering students, you people, if any of you are listening, should know better to just take one bit of negative information and ride the rest of your life out with that.
Yeah.
They should be learning better than that. Of course, engineers listen to our show obviously are more enlightened than that.
Yeah.
But I asked him because he worked out in British Columbia, which is a different political environment, and he knew people from Ontario who went to engineering school there.
Yeah.
And he said, they're very pro-public transportation and not necessarily pro-EV, but they're not anti-EV for the false reasons that So there's a different perception among engineering students who are smart kids, but they should be smarter, is my point. Yeah. And I'm very disappointed in them. And it's interesting that different places of the country have different perspectives, even among them.
I would have guessed that, though, because, as you know, my partner and I, we go for a walk in the winter around the university. We walk indoors because it's too cold outside. And we always walk past, like, the Engineering Student Society. And they have different, like, stickers and little things on the door. And a lot of them are, pro-fossil fuel stuff. So that does not surprise me at all.
But they're environmental engineering. Their whole program is environmental engineering. Of course, fossil fuels hires those people because they need them. And that's where all the jobs are, is in mining and fossil fuels when you come out of engineering in Saskatchewan. Fortunately, my son is into civil engineering. He's able to get into urban planning and urban design.
Yeah. Well, there's different streams. I mean, there's the environmental engineering stream, but then there's all these other ones as well. So
so environmental, that's my brother's new wife was an environmental engineering student there, and she's now teaching, I think, in Ottawa, and she worked in the oil industry for a handful of years before she got the teaching job. So well, good luck. And my nephew who I was with my visit, he said, I'm investing in oil.
Yeah.
So good for him.
Yeah.
And good luck with that, because he's pretty sure that oil is going to have a long and bright future. And I think my brother might be invested in oil too. Yeah, well, they're smart people who are misguided. That's all I can say.
And they would probably point out that the price of oil is very high right now. So they've done a great job. It was a brilliant idea.
They've done a great job, but that's probably going to continue forever. Boy, is it going to take a hit. I wish I could invest in my knowledge, but you have to short things, and shorting is a terrible thing to do, because you can lose money, and you have to borrow money and it's just not an easy way to make money.
We are still going to need oil as the world, transitions, and it's going to be here and in use for a very long time. But what that curve looks like, and, if there is less oil production, then the price of oil goes up. So, in terms of an investment, it's hard to really guess.
There's always that. There's always, how well can they supply? But before this, it wasn't going very well.
Yeah.
Our province, the province next door, who depends on oil more than us, huge deficits. They just announced before the Iran invasion, huge deficits because of oil, like money that we can't have. And that's going to be the future.
Yeah.
And boy, is oil prices going to crash if the flow starts flowing again, because what happens, places like Saudi Arabia with the cheapest oil, it's been predicted for a long time that they would try and sell as much as they can. So they'll flood the market. They'll not necessarily control the output. So this is a gift, but it's also a gift to the energy transition, which will make oil have even more pain. And I think the smartest oil people know that. The actual companies running it actually have a better understanding than some of the kids investing in them.
All right, so on to Australia. This is from Renew Economy. Industries are flocking to the world's first 100% renewable grid. This is the first gigawatt-scale renewable grid. They're technically not there yet. They're hoping to be 100% net clean by the end of next year. They're still trading power with partners next to them, but by the end of next year, they expect to be producing the equivalent of 100% of their grid. And this is a 3.3 gigawatt grid right now that they're expecting to possibly double to 6.5 gigawatts in the next 15 years. This is part of the, Australia solar and renewable and battery storage story that's been going on for a while now. They're just expecting a lot of growth in this area. And we've been talking about data centers, and data centers are a huge hog for power. And this is exactly where they should be going, is somewhere that has, a 100% clean grid. If you're just making an AI data center or mining Bitcoin or something, please stop doing that where there is a dirty grid, and only do that where the power is clean. And they're expecting a real huge economic boom in this area in South Australia in the next 15 years.
But that's peak demand doubling, not general demand, but the peak use of it during those hours of the day when people come home from work and turn on their air conditioners or turn down their thermostat or what have you. It's just the peak demand, not the general demand necessarily.
Yeah, and that's what you generally have to plan for in a grid like that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's also the future of other grids. We can look at jurisdictions like this and say, well, this is going to happen. This is how it's going to happen. And it's going to unfold in other places as well. So you're starting to see this pattern that on my next story come up all over the world. This is about how people are reacting. Different countries are reacting to the fossil fuel oil shock, which is now the largest since 2022, when Russia decided it would be a good idea to invade Ukraine, and the world freaked out and oil shot up. Well, in Pakistan, I have different places around the world, but in Pakistan, electric rickshaws are selling out now. You know what rickshaws are? They have electric versions of those.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily taking off, but now they are, because people can see, and this is why we should have a carbon price on fossil fuels, is to, when the price of fossil fuels goes up, adoption to cleaner technologies goes up as well, right? I mean, this is a given. So in Pakistan, electric rickshaws are selling out now. And in India, a cooking oil shortage is pushing people towards electric induction stoves, which is the type of stove you should be buying, not gas, and not a normal electric stove, but an induction stove, because it is the most efficient. Sales on a major website that sells induction stoves, 30 times higher for induction stoves than normal.
Yeah.
This is what happens. This is actually an argument for, I didn't plan to say this, but this is an argument for putting a price on pollution, putting a price on bad things. But oil shock going to help that. In Germany and Nigeria, rooftop solar demand is surging. People are asking to get solar on the roof as fast as possible. In Nigeria, they're actually using diesel generators sometimes as their power source, so that price goes up. And in the United Kingdom, homeowners are even making the jump to heat pumps, which we know was a push there, and now it's faster because LNG, natural gas prices, are going up, and it sounds like they may go way up despite the upfront cost, which is a huge upfront cost. Some governments help you with that upfront cost. In Germany, where heating oil prices have risen 21% during this war, and solar panels are easily available at IKEA and other big retailers, the reaction to buy solar has been huge. And in 2 Australian states, public transport will be made free in order to incentivize people not to drive and not to use up that precious gasoline from last century. It seems, I know not all of our listeners drive electric vehicles. A lot of them do. But as a person who's been driving them for a while now, and I'm not rich, I found a way to get them and looked at the economics of it all. And it just seems more absurd to you and I, right? I mean, it seems different than most people. Like, this is unnecessary. It's just stupid. It's just, come on.
No, and we couldn't remember what the price of gas was here. And I started looking for it. And one day it was $1.50 a liter. And then the next day it was $1.75 a liter. And that's, very sad for the people that have to pay for it. But hey, there's an alternative.
For us, we don't think about that. We plug in at home. And it's cheap. So the Philippines has declared a national emergency with its government offering subsidies to transport drivers, reducing ferry services, and implementing a 4-day work week for civil servants. That's how bad this fossil fuel shock is for them.
Yeah.
And remember, a lot of these Asian countries are getting their oil from the Strait of Hormuz. It's not just the price of oils, the availability of it is scary.
And how much you have in reserve. Every country has reserves, but how much do you have?
And we talked about China building up the reserves while oil prices were low. They've done it in a big way. Well, they know what they're doing, apparently. They wanted to protect their sovereignty. And how do you protect your sovereignty? With renewables. With 90% of its oil imported from the Gulf, the Asian nation has seen the cost of diesel and petrol more than double. So that's the Philippines. That's going to be a huge shock to them and a huge motivation to not be susceptible to such things. Sri Lanka relies heavily on Gulf states for fuel imports. To conserve fuel, it has declared Wednesdays a public holiday.
Sweet.
For government institutions, such as schools and universities. Wednesday, hump day, off day.
Yeah.
Fossil fuel day. Celebrate the ridiculousness of fossil fuels. It has also introduced fuel rationing with drivers limited to 15 liters a week. Yeah, I'd like to see pickup drivers around here limited to 15 liters a week and see how they do. And motorcyclists just to 5 liters a week. Again, this is in Sri Lanka, where a lot of people are driving a two-wheel transportation. People in Thailand have been told to keep air conditioning at 26 to 27 degrees Celsius, which is a good idea if you can stand it. Anyway, it's an efficient way of doing things. It'll prevent heat exhaustion anyway. While all government agencies have been told to work from home. So it's kind of, in some countries, it's like the pandemic all over again. The Asian country is constantly hot and humid, with Bangkok typically reaching 72% humidity in April. So, yeah, well, that'll be a relief from the humidity if you're running air conditioning even at 26 to 27 degrees Celsius. In Myanmar, private vehicles are currently only allowed to operate on alternative days. EVs, as you may expect, exempt.
Yeah.
Because it does not matter. Vietnam has encouraged people to use bicycles as transportation, so they're going back in time in Vietnam. Motorists in Slovenia will be restricted to a maximum purchase of 50 liters of fuel per day. Businesses and farmers have more generous allowance of 200 liters. In South Sudan's capital, Juba, rolling blackouts are now in place with power cuts on a rotating schedule. And despite having large oil reserves in South Sudan, most of it is exported. They've got their oil, but they're like some African countries, they're not refining it there. They're exporting it. And when it comes back, it's very expensive. So the country's imports all the refined fuel, and it's about 90% of its electricity comes from oil. Oops, South Sudan, there's a better way, and you got screwed because you're living in the past. You're living in an 8-track world when it should be an iPad world. Aviation experts warn of shortages at major hubs within days, prompting airlines like Air France and KLM and EasyJet to revise plans and cut flights. The U.S. Postal Service will impose its first ever surcharge on packages at an 8% fee to cover the rising cost of fuel. Well, you were going to electric trucks to deliver, but you kind of kiboshed that. You have your president to blame. Nobody, you should be getting angry. Getting angry, people.
Yeah.
All people of all stripes should be getting angry. To conserve energy in Egypt, restaurants and shops will have to shut by 9 p.m. For 5 days of the week, they have to shut by 9 p.m. On weekends, they need to close at 10 p.m. Now, Egypt is a place where that is actually really early. They're open way later than that. Egypt is also rolling out a work-from-home requirement every Sunday. Start of the Egyptian work week is Sunday. And in April, which runs for a month, excluding schools, universities, and hospitals, but you have to work from home for the start of your work week. So, why? Because you don't have to cool your workplace, you don't have to heat your workplace, depending on where you are, and you don't have to use fossil fuels to get to work. So that's what's going on.
Yes, and a big spike in the UK in clean energy products we're going to talk about in a moment. Right now, we're going to talk about home batteries in New York City. I did not know this, but home batteries were not a thing in New York City until now. The regulations did not allow for home batteries in New York City. And we've talked about things like bicycle battery fires in New York.
Yep.
I guess it makes sense that their regulations are a little more strict in New York City. It's such a tightly packed place. Fires can probably get out of control and spread more quickly, but they now are allowed. So this is a typical home battery. It's the same size as, a normal home battery, 21 kilowatt hours, half the size of a car battery or a little bit less.
In refrigerator terms, how big would you say they are? Volume-wise, half a refrigerator?
Like the size of a bar fridge.
Okay.
So the one mentioned in the story here, this is from Electrek. It's a Briggs & Stratton Access home battery. It's currently the only residential battery system that's permitted for rooftop installation in New York City. And Briggs & Stratton, they say the design produces very little heat and has a reduced risk of thermal runaway. So it doesn't need extra fire suppression, cooling, or ventilation systems to meet the current city requirements. And it says here that Brooklyn Solar Works, which is the company that installed this, and Briggs & Stratton Stratton, they spent 8 years working with the fire department of New York and the city agencies to navigate and to help shape the permitting process for residential energy storage in New York City. So yeah, they've got some of the strictest fire safety rules in New York, which is probably a good thing. Expanding and allowing home batteries is a good step towards a clean energy future.
Yeah. I'm surprised people are wanting to put them on the roofs unless you're in a building. A residence is different, but a building is kind of different. The only place to put it is on the roof because you don't have a lot of yard space or, garages and things.
That's the thing in New York. Everything is, you don't have any space for much. So on the roof, makes sense.
The other thing I'm surprised by is 8 years ago, home storage wasn't a thing that they got early on this, which is probably a good thing because now it's, what they use these batteries for is mostly to bring in solar power, the excess solar power you create during the day, and then use that throughout the rest of the day instead of selling it back to the grid, because sometimes the grid doesn't pay you much for that power. It pays you a smaller rate that doesn't include transmission. So it becomes very unprofitable to put solar panels on your roof without the battery. Now, there's new batteries that are coming that are, especially the sodium-ion batteries, are starting to show up in home storage. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, I think. Those have no thermal runaway risk, and they're a lot cheaper. And so that I never thought about the whole expense for dealing with the possibility of thermal runaway, the different fire suppression systems and things that would reduce the cost. So that's a good thing. And it reminds me of a YouTube video I was watching on the weekend about an e-bike reviewer reviewing a Walmart in the United States, a Walmart e-bike, because it was pretty cheap. I forget what it was. It was like $5.99 or something US. And he was trying to find out if the batteries were UL listed. That's the listing that you want for certification that they're not going to burn, because that's what a lot of the e-bike batteries were coming from, was fires that were not properly made or not certified to really strict standards. And he eventually found out that they were he contacted the company, which surprisingly answered his call within like a day and got back to him and sent him the documentation to show that it was UL certified. But I think it's a huge mistake for them not to put that logo on unless they have to pay extra money for that. But that should be prominently displayed because any sensible e-bike buyer now will be looking for that on their charger and on their battery to make sure they are safe.
Yeah. Oh, and lots of people are scared about that issue.
I went and looked at our local Walmart to see, well, what are those? Because when we started our show 6 years ago, I noticed there was one for $8.99, an e-bike. And I noticed that all the reviews were very positive. People really loved their first e-bike from Walmart. But the components I know as a bike are about as cheap as bike components get. But the thing is, there was one for $4.99 on sale that was better than the ones that I last looked at the beginning of our podcast. It was on sale, like in store, in Canada. This is not the United States. This is Canada, where the prices should be a lot higher than they. And, it had mechanical disc brakes, which never work well, but you can switch them out to hydraulic brakes for a fairly low price, which I've done on my bikes. And it was, it works. And the batteries are getting smaller. That's the thing that we always talk about on the show for everything, the volume of the energy in the battery. Well, they're making even lighter batteries and lighter e-bikes now. So let's get on to agrivoltaics. What is agrivoltaics? It's when you mix solar power and farmland and continue to use the farmland for things like growing crops, sometimes vegetables, sometimes grains, sometimes animals who will graze on the land under the solar panels. And a research team led by Italy's Catholic University of the Sacred Heart has completed a 4-year field experiment on potato cultivation under agrivoltaic systems. We've talked a lot about all kinds of different things, but not potatoes. Potatoes is a popular vegetable, Brian. Very popular.
Yeah. One of the top ones.
One of the top vegetables. Because they're delicious when fried, I guess. The study analyzed how potato yields and characteristics respond to different shading patterns of these solar panels. And they've come up with a way to shade them properly, and it's interesting, it's not the amount of shade they get, it's the time of the day that they get that shade is important. So they've done really intense, detailed studies here. The potato crop, despite its importance and love of potatoes, has been underrepresented in the agrivoltaic research area, the team said. Instead of just looking at how much overall sunlight crops lose from shading, researchers looked at when the plants are getting light and how that light is spread throughout the day. What they found is that timing really matters. There are key moments in a plant's life, like when potatoes start forming underground, where getting enough light can make a big difference in how that potato's life goes on to be, Brian, and how much food you end up harvesting from that potato. One surprising takeaway was that crop losses didn't just steadily increase as sunlight decreased. Instead, a bit of shading didn't hurt much, but once you pass a certain point, yields drop off quickly. So it's very detailed the way they'll have to do this. In other words, crops can handle some shade, but there's a limit. Go beyond that and production really suffers. They also found that when shading happens, matters more than the overall seasonal average of how much light they're getting. So if crops lose light at key growth stages, it has a bigger impact than you might expect. That's important for designing solar and farming systems because it shows you just can't look at total sunlight. You have to think about the plant biology and the timing. It's a little more complicated for growing potatoes, but you could do that.
Yeah.
With solar panels on the same land.
Yeah.
And people complain. We don't want to use farmland for solar.
Yeah.
But they don't complain about using corn ethanol, which is, for decades, the expansion of corn in North America has all gone to ethanol, not food. Yeah. Nobody complains about that. And it's a very inefficient fuel compared to solar. We've talked about that on the show many times.
Okay, so further to what we were talking about previously from Electrek, suppliers of clean energy systems in the UK, places that sell solar, batteries, heat pumps, they've reported a large spike in demand due to the recent increase in fossil fuel prices, which we know is going on right now. EV charger sales are up as well. So Octopus Energy is a well-known purveyor of these types of clean energy systems, and they say that energy independence is now the top reason that people are switching to these items. This is what their customers are telling them, energy independence. And you're likely going to think of that, especially if you live somewhere that has a lot of blackouts, but home batteries and all this energy independence, just like it's important for countries, is important for people as well. So to keep up with demand, Octopus has rolled out a fast-track installation program for homes that are currently using oil boilers. They can now replace them with heat pumps in as little as 10 days from quote to install. And this is what I would love to have around here. These types of things are just so unavailable where we live.
Yeah.
We're just several years away from this kind of thing, but the UK can show us what the future is like. And swapping out an oil boiler with a heat pump in as little as 10 days from when they quote you to installing you, that is absolutely amazing.
That is amazing, and I don't know how they do it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's red tape and inexperience of the system designers who have to replace it.
Yeah, and there's, around here there always seems to be a shortage of tradespeople, like just finding enough people to do all this work seems difficult. But there's another great quote here from the chief product officer who says, "We're seeing a massive shift as people stop just asking and start acting. British families are tired of being held hostage by global fuel prices." Well, if you don't have to use any fossil fuels, then guess what? You are not held captive by whatever the price is that day.
Well, I want everyone to contact us. Who wants to contact us? You do that by email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And we are going to hold your letters until next week because of time, what we perceive to be a long show this week. But if you want to contact us about anything, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com or speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow.
Our podcast is made possible by listeners like you who can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/cleanenergypod. You can support for as little as $1 a month. We've got things like ad-free episodes, early access, behind-the-scenes material, private updates, thank you credits on the video podcast, verbal shoutouts on the audio podcast, and coming up next is the lightning round.
Meet Christine. She loves shopping. And this is the sound of fashion overload. Too many fabulous things, not enough space. So Christine started selling with The RealReal.
I've always loved collecting designer pieces. Gucci bags, Prada heels. But my style keeps evolving. Selling with The RealReal? Game changer. I earn more, and they do everything.
Seriously, just drop off your items or schedule a pickup. We handle the photos, descriptions, pricing, even shipping. You just sit back and watch your items sell fast to our 38 million members.
And I get peace of mind knowing I earn more selling with The RealReal than anywhere else.
Exactly. That's the sound of your closet working for you. The RealReal. Earn more, save time, sell fast. And right now, you can get an extra $100 site credit when you sell for the first time. Go to therealreal.com to get your extra $100. Therealreal.com. That's therealreal.com.
It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
The U.S. national average diesel price is $5.43 per gallon. National average in the United States for gasoline per gallon per U.S. gallon is $4 now, which equates the last oil shock. EV trucks in China, by the way, 27% of sales last year. I wonder where that's going. I'll be keeping a close eye on that. And yeah, guess what? They're not suffering. You got a business with trucking, short haul, long haul in China, and you got electric, don't matter. Well, you're making, even if your competition's not doing it, you're kicking their ass right now on prices. Yeah. You won't have to raise your prices. BYD believes that over half of its total business could eventually come from sales outside of China. That's the Chinese automaker in China thinks that half of its sales, we know they are aggressively coming to Canada. Check out last week's show. VinFast is going all in on electric scooters. VinFast is the Vietnamese EV company, and now they're going all in on electric scooters in Vietnam with a huge battery swapping rollout. So we've seen a lot of battery swapping for scooters in different parts of the world, different companies doing that, and you just take out the battery like a little heavy little thing you pull out in your hand, you stick it in a vending machine, it pops out another battery, takes seconds, really, and you continue on your way. It knows who to bill for that. You don't have to go through any payment or anything, and it's very efficient. In the California electric grid on March 29th this year, the following happened. At 7 p.m., batteries reached 12.3 gigawatts of output, and that met 42.8% of all of California's electric demand.
And this is a very highly populated state.
It's the size of Canada population-wise. Yeah, put it in perspective, 12.3 gigawatts from batteries. Batteries. Yes, batteries. That's 15 to 20 combined cycle gas plants, LNG power plants. It's 6 Hoover dams.
Wow.
And it's more than the all-time peak demand in Portugal or Greece from batteries. Time for a CS Fast Fact. Every 5 days, the sun sends 50,000 exajoules to Earth. And every 5 days is the equivalent to all the fossil fuel reserves we have in the world right now. So all the reserves comes in the form of sunlight every 5 days. And Brian, there are 365 days in a year. So think about that. 5 states in the United States are currently debating whether to overturn their nuclear bans. Last week, a bipartisan band of lawmakers in Minnesota State House vowed to legalize reactor construction again in the state because we have to. Obviously not listening to the show. In Australia, EV trucking kicked the stinky arse of diesel trucking. In a route from Sydney to Canberra, a freight run, an electric truck was 25 minutes faster, going up, didn't have to slow down for the hills.
Yeah.
And 85% cheaper in fuel costs. 85% cheaper. These are semi-trailers, or lorries, as you say in other parts of the world. It's a 180-mile run, 290 kilometers. That's from the driven. You know, if you're not good at economics, your company's going to get their butts kicked. You know, go electric. Yeah. Go electric. It's going to become more and more of a thing.
Yeah, we've probably all been behind a semi-trailer going up a hill, and they have to slow down.
Yes, they block the lane sometimes, yes.
And you have to pass them.
Time for a CS Fast Fact. U.S. nuclear power plants operate at full power more than 92% of the time. Not all the time, but 92% of the time. Utilities have procured or agreed to procure 984 megawatts of next-generation geothermal capacity across California, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, and locations east of the Rocky Mountains through 11 different power purchase plan agreements. And next generation is the new kind of geothermal that goes deep. Deep. You drill deep. Yeah. You don't have to worry about necessarily how much water there is or how much type of resource there is. You just go deep and you feed fluids down. It comes back hot because no matter where you are in the world, when you go deep, it gets hot. So that's nice to see, but I still think they are going to fall way behind and only be a small part of the mix, unfortunately. NEO opens first Costa Rica store. That's NEO, the Chinese brand famous for their battery swapping vehicles. They have battery swap stations. They're opening their first Costa Rica store to kick off Latin America expansion. The Costa Rica store is NEO's first overseas location to showcase all three of its auto brands. It has got multiple brands. New generation Xiaomi SU7, or SU7, some people call it, begins deliveries within days of launch. That's the phone maker, TV maker, decided to make cars. 2 years later, they had the best car perhaps in the world. It's just insane. And they have multiple variants and high voltage platforms across the lineup. Yes, we talked about the launch of that. Well, now they're in stores. So boom. Not to say that there isn't a year-long waiting list for some of their cars. As efficient as their manufacturing is, it's still not meeting demand because it is a very popular lineup of vehicles. 2 vehicles they have now, a car and an SUV. Tokyo is turning back to nuclear to cut its reliance on natural gas, some of which comes through the Strait of Hormuz. Japan's Kashiwazaki Kariwa plant just brought reactor number 6 to full power for the first time in more than a decade. That one reactor alone is expected to replace about 1.1 million tons of LNG every year, or roughly 15 shiploads of the stuff from one nuclear reactor coming back online. BC, that's the province in Canada on the west coast, already has 380 plus companies working in the EV sector with 8,000 jobs. This is just EVs.
Yeah.
We don't often think about how many jobs and companies are related to EVs. That kind of surprised me because I've been to BC. Lots of EV adoption, but not a huge place. 380 companies related to EVs and 8,000 jobs. It's not nothing. If electric car market share keeps expanding at the average annual rate of the past 3 years, they'll reach 100% of the European Union's new car sales by 2039. And in the UK, that would be 1 year sooner. Of course, we see that rate expanding and things coming sooner without excessive legislation. And finally, this week, a California power provider demonstrated that homes with low-amp electrical panels don't need to do expensive upgrades on those panels to get fossil fuels, to get off of fossil fuels. Blake Hirschcraft has plans to fully electrify his Tahoe City, California home, which runs on a slim 100 amp of electrical service. Brian, before you upgraded your panel, what was your amps in your house? Was it 100?
It was 100.
It was 100.
Yeah, it was 100 and we went up to 200.
Okay. But even with a hot tub, they've got a hot tub. You do not. You're not that kind of guy. You're not a hot tub man.
Not a hot tub guy, no.
In that area that sees an average of 15 feet of snow per year and temperatures that dip into the single digits in Fahrenheit, his house won't need an expensive service upgrade. The Peninsula Clean Energy Company says they frequently hear people claim at regulatory meetings that electrification rules in California will force households to undergo electrical service upgrades that many can't afford. These upgrades can range from $2,000 to $30,000 in California, according to a 2022 analysis. The company says homes can be electrified without upsizing their electrical service. Often 100 amps are more than enough. In 2024, PCE ran a 9-home electrification pilot for low-income customers in San Mateo County, California, which included 5 households with 100-amp panels. At no cost to recipients, the agency replaced their fossil gas and propane appliances with efficient electric ones using the power the homes already had. Plus, PCE didn't need to install specialized equipment such as smart panels, which distribute the power between devices so that you don't have to upgrade your panel. to manage the flow of electricity, they did not need to do that. So after the retrofits, most households saw significant savings on their monthly energy bills.
All right, so you can find us around social media at Clean Energy Pod. The Patreon is patreon.com/cleanenergypod. The email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And as always, remember to hit that follow or subscribe button, and you will get a new episode delivered every week.
Remember to join our Patreon, patreon.com/cleanenergypod. We've got a bonus episode that those people who support our show will get coming up soon. Thank you to our Patreon Clean Club executive members, Tiernan, Brent Rowley, and Green Bastard. And we'll thank you all for supporting our podcast. Please check out our Patreon. We'll see you again in 7 days.
See you next week.